Light pretty good.
Yeah,
This is fair.
Fair, yeah. Well.
Hello.
Yes.
surprised you're not pushing me out of the way for this.
Huh?
Surprised you're not pushing me out of the way.
Oh, I know, like last time.
Yeah.
Business is good here.
Oh, yeah.
Very busy.
Good. Just Madison earlier, turning in signatures, so get on the ballot for the state senate.
Wow.
No, it was pouring rain. Whole drive.
Oh, I know.
My intern out there just trying to get pictures of me about
Did you
that.
get all your signatures?
Yeah,
Oh, how many did you need?
400, we turned in 537, so.
Oh my god.
If you wanna turn it like, you have to have a buffer zone, because you know, some of them are probably gonna.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Proud of you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, it's a big step, just get on the ballot, and we're so happy that that part is going first, and now we can just concentrate on campaigning, so.
Mhm.
That's what I was most excited.
I mean, the city showed up with a bath.
Or you
Yeah.
This is
I
terrible.
Yeah.
So you'll wonder,
Yeah, like by the airport.
yeah, unfortunately, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Box in the back.
Okay, yeah, I used to
Yeah,
live
that's
over
the-
here, not too far from here, but then. My job relocated me to Oak Creek, and so I had to move back down there. It was just closer to work and everything.
No, that
and
makes
I just didn't
sense.
wanna be making long loops around the city, so.
So like it starts like 70th Street.
Yeah.
So everything west of 70th Street, then it goes up to the railroad tracks, and then just over to 76, and then down to Oklahoma, so basically everything west of those points.
Okay.
So, and then we have all of the Berlin, all of Brookfield.
My sister was never.
Oh, yeah, she
I'll
can
tell
vote
her.
for it. Yeah, tell her to vote for it.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, we need the primaries August 9th and then the generals, November. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Very divine.
And then we have like Western parts of Tulsa too, so it's our big district. But our win number for the primary is only 8,000. Don't expect a higher turnout. I think our win number for the general is gonna be somewhere like 37, 38,000. Thank you. And it's a swing district too, so
It's all right.
swing district too.
Mhm.
So we like our chances. Well, 2 years ago, I lost to San Felipe by less than 3,000
Oh, wow.
when I ran for assembly. And that was during a pandemic where we had to do everything virtually.
Yeah, that's hard.
And that was fun. Dan looks very comfortable there in the city. You can hear me.
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So Zach, do we have a quorum? Are we expecting anybody else? I can only see this little 1 by 2 inch
Yes.
screen of who's on.
We do have a quorum, we have 5 members.
Okay. Good. So I will call it to order then right at 6, which is going to be very shortly. And I don't know if somebody can do the ceremonial gavel for me when it becomes 6 o'clock.
Jessica is
If we-
the gavel.
Awesome.
I got you.
Cool. Okay, I am showing 6 o'clock, so gavel away. We will call the meeting to order, and I will ask staff to take a quick roll call.
Alright, Mayor Devine,
Here,
Wayne Clark,
Yes.
Kathleen Dagenhart is excused, Jessica Katzenmeyer,
Here.
Brian Frank is excused, David Roshka, here. Rossi Lanka,
Present.
Eric Torkelson, here, and Ben Holt is excused.
all right. Thank you. Then we'll go to item C, which will be approval of the minutes from our April 27th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There a motion and a second. Are there any changes or tweaks to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Then we will move on to our new and previous matters, and we will take up item 2, and I will turn it over to Zach.
Thank you, Mayor. If we could, we would also like to consider 3A and 3B alongside item 2.
Sure.
Okay. So this item is Taco John's at 6767 West Greenfield Avenue. This is a certified survey map, a conditional use permit, and site landscaping and architectural review. So just a brief overview of the site and the zoning. This property is at 6767 West Greenfield. Is currently one large lot. This is Tri-City Bank right here, and essentially a large parking lot. It will be split into 2 lots, lot 1 and lot 2. This project will commence at lot 2. This is the reuse is a restaurant with accessory drive-through service, which is a conditional use, and we've scheduled the public hearing for June 7th. One note on this project, the applicant applied before the adoption of the new zoning ordinance, which was officially enacted on May 6th. So they have the vested right to either the old or the new codes and those regulations. So a brief history of the site. And the
Excuse me, what does that mean to us?
That means that the rules that we'll be considering for them just have to meet either the old or the new zoning code rules, and staff will make sure to clarify if there's any points that impacts, but it really doesn't have a huge impact on this project. Yep. So Tri-City Bank originally opened in the site in 1990. They have a bank on the first floor with a drive-through ATM and then offices above for different businesses. And they had lots of land for surplus parking lots. So this kind of coincides with now Taco John's is expanding the Milwaukee area. This is a chain with 400 locations across the country, and they're opening a variety of stores in the Milwaukee area. 2 of them are opening this year, and they're going to have about 10 in following years. This is a $1.3 million project. It's about 2,500 square feet of new building. This is the lot here. This is probably more cars than any of us have seen on this lot in quite some time. It's pretty much vacant all the time. So here's an overview of the site plan. So just to orient yourself, this is West Greenfield Avenue to the north here. This is a private driveway to the west. Here's the south, and back down here is the strip mall. And then the railroad tracks are over here to the east. So to access the site, Taco John's is proposing 2 driveways on these private drives, essentially in the previous parking lot area. There will be no driveway frontage onto Greenfield Avenue. The building will be located on the kind of northwest side of the property. There will be a drive-through, and it'll have 2 stacking lanes where orders will be placed. And it will reduce to one lane where service will be. That is in front of the building to Greenfield Avenue here. They're also proposing to add a new sidewalk along the western property line, as well as some landscaping, which we'll show in a minute. There have been some significant improvements from the initial submittal. Staff worked pretty closely with the applicants, and they were very amenable to a lot of our suggestions. For example, they initially had an additional kind of bailout style drive-through lane that would have pushed the building back further from the front property line. We wanted this to be kind of more consistent with the area there. There's several other drive-through restaurants like Cousins and Burger King, which are located a little bit closer to the main street there. We wanted to kind of continue that street wall effect that we'd like to see throughout the area. We also recommended increasing some of the landscaping area to the south here. And adding the sidewalk connection. One thing for the site to note is that there's really not, the sidewalk right now is in some ways a sidewalk to nowhere. There's no other sidewalk connections to the south. However, as this site redevelops, we'd like to see those pedestrian connections kind of integrated into the urban streetscape in the area. So this is something we asked for, and the applicant accommodated. Here's a look at the landscaping plan. The biggest change here is we're going to be reducing a lot of impervious space that was, just empty paving into a lot more impervious area. They're proposing to do some lawn and landscaping on the south end here and kind of buffering the parking lot from the southern lot lines, as well as some lawn to the east side of the property, with a significant amount of landscaping as it gets closer to where the building is. Along the front property line, our city forester noticed that the bushes and the trees were in pretty poor condition. We're kind of reaching the end of their feasible life there. So the city forester recommended that Taco John's implement some new trees and some different plantings there, instead of some shrubs that are really bulky and overgrown. Some more kind of like native grasses or perennial flowers that are a little bit lower and kind of more consistent with the area. Those are kind of the main recommendations, and the applicant was amenable to those as well.
Excuse me, Zach,
Yes.
does the applicant agree with the landscaping plan?
Yes, this is their landscaping plan they submitted to us. They revised their plan from their initial submission.
Thank you.
Here's a look at the architectural plan. So this is the building as it appears from Greenfield Avenue, this top picture. This is as it appears from the south side of kind of the parking lot as you're kind of going up towards it. So essentially we kind of see two main forms here. To the east is this slightly larger part of the building without any windows, and kind of it's a third brick basically, a third, it's called LP Smart Sided cementitious board. That building is where the kind of back of house operations will be. The front side of the building, the more public facing side is to the west. This has larger windows. They're 8 feet tall, and going to be transparent glass. It has a slightly different kind of styling. It's a little bit lower. This is separated by this kind of red accent wall, which is part of the company's kind of, branded architecture. This is something that we worked pretty significantly with the applicant on as well. The initial submission didn't have any brick in it. And we wanted to work with them to kind of have some elements that kind of rooted in the neighborhood there in the, where we have obviously Alice Chalmers nearby with lots of brick. This specific brick system, we initially recommended a standard brick, but they proposed what's called tabs 2. It's a type of thin brick system that is an improvement on previous thin brick systems where we had, there have been issues with it popping off, and we consulted with an architect we know, and he advised that this was an acceptable material. And we were able to work with them to increase that amount of that on the property around the building there, to kind of give it a little bit more diversity of material and some materials that will kind of stand the test of time better than just kind of a single cementitious kind of look and feel. Here's just the look at the elevations then. This isn't showing too much more detail than we were in the renderings, but just for reference if we need to go back to discuss. Then a look at the floor plan. So this is, again, this is like the Greenfield Avenue side of the building here to the north, this is the south. So this is the white area here is the kind of back of house operations, the kitchen, office, storage. The blue area is the dining room where the public can enter. And then right here in orange is the publicly accessible ADA bathrooms. So staff recommends approval subject to a variety of conditions. First, the revised landscaping plan, which the applicant has since submitted. Landscaping species plan approved by forestry, again, that's been submitted, and our forestry department will look that over. Revised exterior lighting plan, refuse enclosure details. They have submitted the certified survey map, which is part of this overall proposal. We are also going to be requiring a surety bond, documentation and approval showing compliance with the stormwater management ordinance, which they have submitted. Then just some notices that any work in the right of way should be coordinated with the city engineering, a utility plan, and then the common council conditional use approval, which again we'll have in a public hearing in early June. So at this point, if our commissioners have any questions or comments.
I move approval.
When does construction start?
Construction will start.
Thank you, Zach.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Construction will start fairly soon. I expect that they have to apply for a building permit still. I know their plan is to do that this summer and hopefully be able to open, I believe, by the winter time of this year.
Do you know who their contractor is?
I do not know who their contractor is.
Just out of curiosity, what are the hours of operation being planned for this?
Hours of operation,
I didn't see that in there.
I don't know if I have that on hand. They did supply an hours of operation. I remember it being consistent with what we've seen in the area.
Okay,
It's nothing extreme, it's not like 4 AM or anything like that. Yeah, sorry, I don't have that up for reference.
okay, hours. I'll second it.
Could you go back to the site plan, please?
Yes.
So you mentioned, so my biggest issue with this is the drive-through facing on the Greenfield. I don't love it. And I know you mentioned there's other businesses in the area, but I believe they all have their drive-through on the back or on the side, where this is gonna be, we don't have a lot of these. The only one I can think of is maybe Chick-fil-A on Highway 100, where they've got the queuing right on the street there, which is not great. I certainly would not expect them to go back and redesign. I understand why they did it, and I agree with planning, trying to get it closer to the street frontage. I just don't love that. Do we think the landscaping is enough that we're gonna get some screening?
The landscaping, we could work with them to maybe have try to get some taller plants in there.
I think, I mean, I'm the lone voice here, but that, I would prefer, I think, just some, and I don't know, it has to be real tall, because again, now I get where that works against their visibility. Greenfield is obviously where they want people to be able to see the signage and see the building. I just don't know if there's a happy medium, if we can get some sort of, I don't know if they go for like a low landscape wall or some additional shrubs or somehow to block the view of all the cars that are gonna be sitting there. I don't know, that's my thought. And then my second thought on this, if you can go to the elevations, and I don't know that there's much that can be done with it. I just think, again, it's unfortunate that the back of the building is presenting on the Greenfield. So we've got the windows, and everything facing inwards, and we don't, the street presence isn't great.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to note too, that we asked about specifically was this kind of back of house area here. This is facing east, and this is the kind of northeast corner right here. So this kind of access ladder and door here would also be kind of pointing towards the street frontage there a little bit. That's something we asked about as well, just for note.
I guess the only, again, I wouldn't ask them to redesign or go back, but I wonder, they've got these kind of colored accents that wrap the building. And I wonder if they could maybe jog it so that we get the color on the left side as well, where if you look at the south elevation, and I apologize for that as well, the one that Mayor Devine is covering there, we've got the white in the middle with the color accents on both sides. And I wonder if they could get that same effect facing on the Greenfield. At least it gives it a little bit more.
Okay, and rather than this kind of.
Yeah, they could shift,
singular-
you know what I'm saying, maybe they could shift the colors and then introduce a little bit more color tile to turn the corner. I would rather see those colors facing on the Greenfield than I think facing into the parking lot. I don't know what else you can do with it. Again, I understand program wise why they can't have the windows and the openings in there. I think we're doing a little bit of a disservice by having them, again, present the back of the building, the Greenfield Avenue there. It's just not. It's not great. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know that it would be enough for me to vote against it, but those are, again, two things that just jumped out to me right away, that if we could possibly get more screening for the parking and maybe get a little bit more color or pop on the Greenfield elevation, just for the street presence in that area.
One note, when we first received these plans, we did ask them as well about whether there was other layouts that they thought were feasible for the site. And one issue with this site is that it's kind of a unique layout as well, which is, I think, why they oriented the drive-through this way, where the kind of long end was along the street frontage there. Just kind of with how the site could flow, that was what they felt was the most feasible arrangement for it. But if Plan Commission is interested, we could explore adding a condition to have some sort of low landscaping wall or something like that along that drive-through edge, if you're interested.
Yeah, I would move to amend the motion. I think they can continue to work with staff. I don't think it has to come back.
Okay.
But if you can work with them on the landscaping and just whatever we can do for screening And again, if there's anything aesthetic that you can do, just with maybe moving some of the colored panels around to get a little bit more, just a better aesthetic pop on Greenfield Avenue. Again, I hate to just put a brand new building, but we're looking at the back of the building and that's how it looks. It'd be nice if we could just get a little bit more color or.
What if we could use remove the shrubs and put some tree plantings in place to make like a taller view from Greenfield Avenue?
They will be removing some of the existing trees as well and planting new ones. These are, I believe, honey locusts. And they will be adding maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new trees along there.
So are you most concerned with the driveway coming in and
This
the right
one-
of way, like the arc there, or is just that whole frontage?
I think it's the whole frontage there. Again, when you drive down Highway 100, which is the only one that I can think of, is Chick-fil-A there. And when Chick-fil-A is busy, I mean, you're backed up with all this,
Yeah,
the
I
cars
know
right
what
on
you
the
mean,
street
yeah.
there, and it's not a great look. But I understand the site constraints here, so I wouldn't ask them to go back and redesign. I think it's a good project, and I'm supportive. Those are a couple things that if we could get a little bit more with with the screening and just the aesthetics, I think whatever we can get is gonna be a win.
Zach, I can jump in there too.
Yeah, sure.
Dustin Salter with Excel Engineering, so I was the civil engineer on the project. I don't see any issue with us, improving some of that street frontage landscaping or, I know initially we worked with Zach and Steve on providing some perennial planting, so it was actually, the goal was actually, so it was lower. So that, to get more of a visibility aspect from Greenfield. But I mean, if screening or whatever is somewhat of a concern, we could do something where, I think like across the street there, they got like little cluster of like evergreen plantings. I mean, we could do something like that where it's kind of break it up a little bit. Yeah. And I can talk with the architect too on the project and just, express your concerns with the elevations there and see if there's anything they can do there.
Yeah, I wouldn't look to add cost or, but again, if you're doing some multicolored panels, if there's a way we could maybe bring some of the colors around to that, the street frontage, I think helps visibility as you go down Greenfield.
Yep, I can certainly check on that and.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I heard a motion and a second, but then, David, when you were talking, you mentioned amending a motion. Do you think that was that verbally acceptable to the person that made the motion, or do we need to restate it?
Restate it, please.
So I'd move to recommend approval contingent on staff comments and staff working with the client on screening along Greenfield Avenue and potentially the aesthetics of the colored panels on the Greenfield elevation.
Second?
Does that work? Was that a second, Rossi? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And then the chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
And, now we'll move on to item 4. I'll turn it over to staff.
Right, thank you, Mayor. So item 4 is a master sign program review for Kohl's Sephora. This is an existing business located at 2601 South 108th Street. This is an application for our master sign program. Some background, Kohl's, the store is undergoing some rebranding and refurbishing on the inside of their store. And part of that is working with their partnership with the different companies, Sephora, that they're going to be hosting inside of their store. They applied for a sign permit to do a new sign under the standard sign code. You cannot have 2 signs on the same frontage of the building like this, or in front of a tenant space like this, essentially. So we recommended they apply for the master sign program. Their store qualifies because it's greater than 25,000 square feet, and they are allowed under the master sign program. They are allowed 2 wall signs up to 400 square feet. So their sign plan is to keep the existing 190 square foot Kohl's sign and add the proposed 50 square foot Sephora sign as channel letters, essentially. This would result in 2 wall signs, which meets the master sign program maximum of 2, and for 240 square feet of signage, which is under the 400 square foot maximum. So staff recommends approval. Any questions or comments from the planning commission?
Move approval.
Was there a second? I'm sorry.
Yes, there was.
Okay. I heard the motion, but not the second. Any discussion on the motion? There is none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair will vote aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, and next up is Braun's Powerhouse, and I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Joe and Lisa Braun here in attendance today with us, as well as Skylar Julie.
Yeah,
Julie, with their electrician. So some background about commercial lighting. We created guidelines in 2015 about commercial lighting, specifically prohibiting this type of rope lighting, LED lighting with kind of facing outwards, which can be a nuisance to properties, and when applied throughout the city, can lead to kind of a negative effect, which is what these are some of those kind of reasonable standards that our codes allow for the planning commission to adopt. And so these were the guidelines that were adopted. We also have a signage code which regulates lighting. So there's just some background on what those rules are, and something we can reference if we have any discussion about this moving forward. So the project here is for new lighting at Braun's Powerhouse, which is located in an existing tavern located at 7100 West National Avenue. The property owner had previously installed some LED strip lighting on the awnings without getting the permit, but the property owner was responsive, very responsive to our code violation notice, which was sent. And it's common that people aren't aware of obviously all the codes and regulations in the city, so we appreciate them just being responsive and looking to find a solution. In late April, they submitted a lighting plan to the city, and so we will be conducting a review of this commercial lighting plan. So the proposed lighting plan is to remove these existing LED lights, which are what the initial violation was for, and proposing a new style of LED dotless lighting with a diffuser on the awning exterior. So the initial style was kind of those LED lighting where you can see the individual bulbs, and this is they're proposing a different type of LED lighting where it's kind of one continuous strip. So looking at some of our architectural and sign code guidelines, we see that our staff, I guess, interprets that the proposed lighting still is in violation of some of our guidelines. For example, our guidelines say that light shielding should reflect light away from the street. Light distribution should not spill onto adjacent properties, and pedestrians should not be able to see the direct light source. And that glare should be minimized. So while this is an improvement on the original dotted style of LED, we believe this still doesn't meet some of those guidelines that we have for the city. And again, as a staff, we aren't trying to do anything that would hurt someone's business or would make it unfeasible for somebody to operate. But we just want to apply these kind of guidelines that the planning commission has set in place, and something that when applied throughout the city, this could be ultimately detrimental, nuisance lighting and things that are kind of, I guess, undesirable for the community. So looking at this, we want to work with Braun's and Powerhouse and find a solution that works for everybody. Staff's recommendation is to there's several options that could be done. One thing that could be done is to simply kind of point the lighting, keep it on the exterior of the awning, point it downwards, and apply a light shield to the out to make it so it's not directly shining out onto adjacent properties, or is directly visible to people moving through the right of way. Another option would be to put it underneath the awning, so that the awning is essentially functioning as a cover to keep it away, that direct source of lighting away from the public. We have a variety of locally approved examples where these kind of diffuse types of LED lighting have been allowed and reviewed in site plans and accepted. I believe the clients here, or the applicants, have an example of the lighting here. If you'd like to
Just walk around and show.
Yeah, you can walk around if you like.
I brought a sample of the dotless lights just to show what we propose to do. This sample kit also has samples of the actual dotted lights, so you can see a comparison between the two. So you can kind of see the bottom ones are the dotted lights. When I cover it up, you can see this is what we propose to install. I'm not sure if Zoom will pick that up at all. So that's the bare LED itself. That's without the lens or diffuser on it. We do plan to install a lens over that like this, which essentially it's almost the same effect as what like a neon light would be, or a backlit acrylic sign or something along that, along those lines. Walk up with this. Third one.
So that's the new proposal.
Correct.
The third one from the top.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
These are fully dimmable, so you know if we can come to some resolution where we meet in the middle, maybe agree to a set brightness level or something along those lines, as a compromise, possibly part of the solution. We have explored a lot of the options with the indirect lighting as was shown on that slide. Before we even installed these strip lights, we started with a indirect mount under the canopy just like that, with more of a floodlight style bulb washing down onto the brick walls. And we found that there's so much ambient light from both the street lights, the stop and go traffic lights, as well as the property across the street from Bronze, which is it created a tremendous amount of ambient light on the brick where the color was pretty much negligent. So that's why we went to more of a direct light where you can actually see defined colors.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Wayne.
a question for you, Zach. Have you had a chance to review this?
We looked at online demonstrations of the product, and I think we kind of can I guess continue our same assessment of it. But we have not seen them in person like this today.
So you need some time to review this?
That could be one option. Yes, I think our recommendation is to I guess approve with conditions that it be changed to one of our suggestions. However, we could also hold it, and if possible, staff approve it as well. That's could be another route we go to.
Well, I would move that we hold this to give the applicant and your operation, you and Steve, a chance to drill down and decide what in the world you want to come forth with. Or what you would approve.
Can you go back to the, so what is being proposed? That, because we're seeing right here what staff is recommending, what is being proposed?
So can you go back to another slide? So similar to what's already on here, these are aluminum extrusions pointed down at a 45-degree angle. So it's not directly towards the road, it is pointed down towards the sidewalk. And they do have a diffuser on them. So we propose to utilize that same layout with the new style lights and a thicker diffuser on them as well. There'll be one solid continuous color and there won't be any diodes in them, which we felt was in compliance with the guidelines that we were reading about, as they don't have the diodes. And
This is on, so if you go back to your sketch, so this would be down at the bottom and facing
Correct.
out or facing.
Yeah, and without like a full shield type effect there. And I think our staff, I think we would like to ideally see this resolved in plan commission tonight, and whether the Bronze approves of the decision or not is something that could be appealed to common council. I think we've worked with them pretty extensively and are somewhat of an impasse, I guess you could say, where staff is recommending one of these changes, and they're I guess wanting to continue with their planned slightly diffused lighting option. So I think this is something that we appreciate your input on, and what the planning commission likes to see.
So are you guys for or against the awning that the city proposed?
in that manner where they have the shade on it, we're against it, because we have tried that and we've mocked it up like that. And because it's sticking out from the building and it's more over the sidewalk, there's even more ambient light over the sidewalk, and it's a black awning, so it absorbs all the light. So when you do it as proposed, it's, you know, pretty much pointless. You can't see the actual colors of the lights that they're intending to try to show.
What about the other one?
That one as well, the whole wall below that is all windows. So again, there's not much reflected light coming off those windows. Everything is already, there's a lot of reflections in those windows from all the signs and lights in that area already.
Zach, I understood you to say you are at an impasse.
I think, I think from where we're at, there's, yes, some difference between where staff is and where Bronze is at, yes.
Well, I don't think this body is intended to be a design function. It's designed to look at a proposal, look at your recommendation and vote accordingly. And I just think we ought to put it on hold.
Can you go back to the ordinance there? Thank you. I mean, you didn't highlight the top one there, but typically the colored lighting would not be allowed.
Yeah, I think that's great. There are some instances where we have colored lighting that is like specifically used. We're obviously working with, we have several properties across the city that we're working with actively, who have violations of the sign code, and we know typically because they are colored lighting. But there are also some where they have, some sort of, it's a different variety of hues that are kind of diffused, but I don't think we're wholly against colored lighting, but.
What if we change the angle of the lighting to not reflect the street and reflect the building instead?
What do you?
So you said it would be at a 45-degree angle towards the street. What about putting it at the opposite?
Towards the building?
Yeah,
I think,
like a 180.
yeah, that's it kind of again goes into the ambient light situation with that area. If it's facing backwards, you can't see it from when you're looking face on at the building, then there's not enough light output to reflect onto the building to see the colors.
I mean, if I'm understanding this correctly, your intent is that you want this colored light strip to be visible. You want everyone to see it, because that's obviously
That was the intent, yeah.
In the same regard as,
and staff is saying that part of our code, you can't have it shine out where people can see it.
But
Yeah.
my thing is the building next door shines outward all over my building.
Right.
And it's not diffused.
The building they're referring to
It's-
was a project that was
It's very bright.
reviewed by the
All
planning
over
commission,
the
and their
street.
lighting plan was approved. And we believe that, they've styled their lighting in a different way, where it is, not directly, the bulbs aren't directly, shining out towards the street. So that was something that planning commission did review and approved that specific project's lighting plan, when their site landscaping and architectural plans were approved.
So they use the same type of lighting, but they oriented it.
I think they have a different style of lighting and it's oriented differently as well.
It's got dotted light.
So-
It's all dotted with a diffuser, like I use a diffuser.
yeah,
Mine are just colored, theirs are white. I mean, you go up and see the lights. You see the LEDs up above. I mean, I guess it's how everyone views things. I mean, there's so much LEDs all over the city shining on the street. I drive down the street and I gotta read a LED sign that a business has saying, come here Sunday. And that's not a distraction, but these little lights are a distraction, which I don't understand.
And again, we recognize that there's a problem with road lighting and LED lighting in the city, and it's something we're working with the code enforcement department on actively right now to get more buildings into compliance. I know there's some staffing limitations to that, but it is something we are actively working on. But
I mean, is it something where if, as they have indicated, if you can get they can get it dimmed to a level where we're getting a color light that obviously attracts attention, but it's not distraction to traffic. and
I-
pedestrians.
I can have it.
There to have it, you know, is that something where staff would,
I think we would be okay with a dimmer solution that's more of a glow, as obviously there's lots of like like the example they brought up with like neon type lighting, that's more of that kind of like soft glow lighting.
and you had indicated these are dimmable readings.
Correct. I have an example here, I just want to show you guys. I mean, this is like a gas station we took a picture of where it's a backlit acrylic panel along the whole perimeter.
That's an Amoco that we have a sign violation out for right now for that exact thing, because they were actually, their sign permit was approved without that light bar and they installed it anyway, so our code enforcement department has a violation out for them for that right now.
Regardless of the violation or not, I think that's just a good example of what the type of light output you could expect with this setup would be with both the diffuser and the backlit seamless LEDs.
I was gonna say, like those lights that you showed us earlier, the white ones were really, really bright.
Correct.
And that's what I think what their issue is with the building next door, am I right? Yeah, so,
And it's possible,
What el-
it's possible that the building next
Ours
door
are
was,
just a little.
And I'm not trying to, I don't wanna be like flashing, I just want to add some color, I can change it with the holidays, red, white, and blue, that's why I wanted those. And I can even dim those down. Right, right, Skylar, I can even, those can even be not as bright, but that's all I was doing, I wasn't trying to.
so you'd be okay with something like if we did a condition where they had to be colored light and then you had to have them dimmed down a certain amount?
I think that would be something we'd be, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we went to this other resolution too, to
Mhm.
not have the diodes.
You know, that would be a good compromise, because you can, you know, obviously you'd still be able to see the color, which is the entire intention of this project, just to be able to show those colors essentially.
Right, as long as they're not white, because the white will just chill out.
Right, which is sort of.
Yeah, I wasn't ever about the white. It was- there were
To
colors.
staff's concerns, though, I understand where you're kind of opening a can of worms here, if you approve this, then are you opening the door for all sorts of?
Yeah, and I think that's our staff's main concern, is not, as much with an individual property as with the fact that, as we approve these, do we want to have a city where these lights are everywhere, or do we want to limit them in some fashion? And that's kind of the question at hand.
In every case, it should be coming before us, so where we would have an opportunity to discuss and review.
That's great.
Yeah, I guess in general, I don't. To your comments, if it was contingent on the city determining what the dimness level is acceptable. I guess I don't have an issue with it.
And then my next question would be, how would we determine a dimness level, like a certain percentage of?
We could probably have staff, we could probably manage that with them as well. We could have essentially, this could be, planning commission could approve it with the condition that the applicant works with staff to determine appropriate brightness level. And then we could take it from there and work with them directly.
So I can make a motion to have that contingent.
But then we're kind of like violating a standard, right, that we're essentially trying to set here citywide.
Yeah,
I guess that's kind of my issue,
Yeah.
but then we don't have a standard here, and it's
Yeah.
kind of flip a coin at planning commission, yeah, what do we feel today?
Yeah, and that's, I think that's why our ultimate recommendation was to have some sort of physical barrier over them from the public way. So that they aren't directly, shining that way, and that's kind of why that was our staff ultimate recommendation.
Can you go back to the code?
Zach, if I could, sorry, Rusty, I was gonna say that I think the best example of what you're trying to describe here is what was done at Lynch's on Highway 100 in Lincoln, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was recommended in one of those examples on that.
Where they're tucked underneath and just kind of still get the glow, but you don't actually see the lights.
Yeah, I think that's staff's was what our, understand, I guess our intention was to have that kind of an effect. Where it's not direct diffused.
Yeah. So did we have a motion? I'm sorry I didn't know if there were any other questions.
So I just wanted to go back to the code again.
Okay,
Oh, sorry, this one. There.
Okay, light distribution shall not spill over onto adjacent properties. So he's saying the business across the street is widely visible on his building. So is that a code violation in itself?
Yeah, that could be a code violation, and it's something we can look into with our code enforcement department.
So then when do we draw the line? I think
It's-
Yeah, I think-
it's hard, you
It's
know?
difficult and it's difficult because staff, or the city doesn't necessarily have the resources to be 100% on top of these as they pop up in the community as well. So that's something, we have, our code enforcement department is able to, review, but there's gonna be some that are out there,
Could you run this lighting below the windows and have it shine down on the brick? I know you get a lot of ambient glare off the windows and all the light coming out, I totally understand that. Could you run LED strip lighting shining down on the brick at the windowsill height and wash the wall and do your color changing there? Would that get an effect that would work for you? Have you tried that?
We tried that originally, like we had, Skylar. He set up lights inside to shine down on the brick, and it just, the lights from the street and that are so bright there that it really was not worth it. And I was just trying to brighten up our corner a little bit, that's all I was doing, but, I didn't know I was breaking any codes at the time. I thought it was like Christmas lights, So.
so what's the pleasure of the commission?
Well, I have a motion on the table to hold and let the two parties get together and figure out what they want to bring back here.
Okay.
Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Was that Rossi?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I
Okay,
think once we
then,
come to terms with the dimness and get all that information, and we can come back and have everything set in stone.
Yeah, I guess just like what would be the next steps here? So it's gonna go on hold, but you guys are at an impasse, so then what are you gonna discuss to kind of get past that? I guess that's kind of where my hold up here.
I agree with you, and while I would love to see something, I have to agree with staff that even with it dimmed, I think we're pushing against what we've already set in place as guidelines, so I think I would have to go against it regardless, unless we could find a way to turn them so that but that goes against what you're trying to do, and I understand it, so it's tough, but I think I would have to try and enforce the guidelines we have in place, and what you're trying to do right now just doesn't fit the guidelines.
And I think I'd like to see more of a set standard of what the dimness should be.
I don't know, again, I would love to find a way to make it work or find a way to do the lights, I just don't know that what the city is trying to enforce with the guidelines that we have now.
Another option for planning commission could be to recommend or to deny it, and then we could continue to work with them and bring it to our board of appeals, or I believe the common council, depending on how the code's written. But we could, that could be the next step, I don't know if that's an alternate, I guess.
Yeah, I would be up for that, I think that, because then we're kind of saying we're trying to hold to a standard here, at least that's my view.
I would move to withdraw my motion, make a new motion to deny.
Second.
So I was gonna say, if we have more of a set standard of dimness and stuff like that, then I'd be a little bit more comfortable making a motion for contingency.
And I think in the meantime, we do need to check the building across the street to make sure they're not violating the code either, because that's not fair on this president.
I would agree with that too. Did you second already?
so on
Second.
on the motion to deny, is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then I'll vote aye, and then the motion carries, and we'll revisit this through the Board of Appeals.
If that's how we choose to go about it, yeah.
And when does the Board of Appeals meet?
The Board of Appeals meets in, I believe the second Tuesday of every month, something of that nature. It's early each month.
Right,
we would be able to communicate with their team to set that up.
Okay. All right, then the motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 6, a discussion on design review guidelines.
Speaking of design guidelines, yes, feel free to.
Thank you.
Thanks for. So, design, so this is just a discussion item, no voting, but it's something that staff would, I guess, in light of our recent zoning code update, this is something we'd like to pursue. So our goal, so essentially when updating the zoning code, we recognize there are some gaps in our design review process, and some of those gaps we may have just seen tonight in some ways as well. So our zoning code has very clear, concise design standards. But our review process can be somewhat ad hoc, and it's kind of unclear to applicants how we're going to evaluate their project beyond just the straight up code compliance. And we have a kind of a mishmash of some guidelines like our signage guidelines and our lighting guidelines, but they aren't, we don't have a comprehensive set of guidelines, and we don't have them that are abundantly clear and consistently, I guess, enforced. So our thinking is, how do we get proposals from just meeting our code to really meeting and exceeding our whole community's expectations for design? And we think that design guidelines is a good way to go with this. So design standards are those objective quantitative measures and design attributes. So that's things like setback, et cetera, those hard numbers, where design guidelines are more flexible, but they're qualitative measures of the design attributes. And we have some of these in, for our lighting, for our signage, but we don't have that kind of comprehensive set of design guidelines for our overall kind of review processes. So there's 2 real benefits to this. Is first, improving our process. So we want to make our process more consistent and objective, make it easier for people when they come to us with a project. They'll know what to expect. They know what types of comments we're going to give them. They know how to maybe orient their design to fit our community better. Specifically with, this is could be a common problem with things like such as Taco John's, a corporate company. They have their own standard that they just kind of stamp across the country. And do we have a sort of design vision for our community that we want them to have to amend their designs to? So we think that having a clear set of design guidelines can enhance our communication between the applicants and staff, and then also between staff and the planning commission. We envision a set of design guidelines being a framework that we can do each design review through. So the applicant would, in their application, would have a statement about how they meet our design guidelines. When we're communicating with them, we would say, we think your design doesn't meet this objective as much as it should, or it does a good job of meeting this objective, et cetera. And then when we actually have our plan commission meetings, one additional part of this could be as we're looking at the architectural plan, as we're looking at the site plan, we can pinpoint those objectives and how they meet them. So then this can also improve our design improve the design of the projects then as they come to our plan commission, because we can more strongly express our expectations, which gives us better leverage in the design review process. One thing we've noticed, things like Taco John's, that we may have specific recommendations for them, but they have pretty easy path to argue around it because we don't have any real guidelines for them, essentially. And then we can also better define our community's character and then enhance our built environment through having those guidelines. So as I've touched on these, but some of the main reasons communities use these guidelines is to make better places to live and work and play. They're often associated very closely with economic development, kind of enhancing the overall image of a community. Ensuring that projects take their surroundings into consideration doesn't mean that they have to match their context, but just that they're aware of what's going on around them and how their site interacts with the neighbors. Ensuring that they enhance our public realm. That's one thing that some projects may have had issues with in the past. Things like the Highway 100 corridor. We don't have a very good public realm there, and having better clear design guidelines could be a way to kind of achieve that. And even protecting our environmental assets, being more clear about the amount of landscaping we'd like to see, stuff like that. So in practice, design guidelines often look like overarching goals and then objectives for how to meet those goals, and then communities will specify specific examples. So probably the best practice in the country for this is Portland, Oregon. Portland has they have a set of their design standards and their codes, and they've related those into 3 kind of key goals for their design guidelines. So their 3 goals are context, the public realm, and quality and resilience. They have a nice little sentence that says what that goal is, but those are essentially the 3 buckets that their guidelines fit into. Then they have 3 objectives within each of those. So for example, for context, actually maybe a better one to look at is public realm. One of them is activating the sidewalk level of the building. The other is, another objective is to give opportunities to pause, sit, and interact, add to the public space with benches, things like that. And then the third is to mitigate the impact of parking and building services. So those are that's an example of their objectives and how those kind of relate to that overarching goal then. So in their design guidelines, I don't think we would want to make something as complex. We aren't as big of a city. We aren't serving a massive population like a major city like Portland does. We wouldn't want it to be something that's super cumbersome for people to get through, but kind of a simplified version of this could work well for us. And how they do this is, they'll have a page basically explaining one of their objectives, and then they'll have some pictures from their community and show how different elements might meet those objectives. And so those examples are an important part of the guidelines too. They'll have specific things like have tall window heights with transparent glass, things like that might be an example. So I kind of touched on this before too, but design guidelines would be useful for us in a lot of the stages of our review process. Before the application, we did want them to be publicly available on the website, so anybody who is looking at stuff can kind of prepare in advance. We would also want to share it specifically with any applicants as they're applying. On the application, they would submit a brief document kind of showing how their proposal meets our guidelines. And then after the application, during our review process, we would work with them directly in our staff review to review, kind of have amend their project to better meet our guidelines. Then our staff report, we would include kind of an analysis of how we think it meets the guidelines, and that would just be essentially a different framework for how our current staff reports work. We would still have all that same information, but we kind of structure it in a way where we can touch on these guidelines too. And then in our planning commission discussion, then this would give us maybe a simpler, more clear, more obvious kind of framework to kind of guide our discussions about these projects and about how our review considerations are. So if we were to want to kind of move forward with this, we would, first we're kind of sharing our vision with this, with you and with the Safety and Development Committee. We'll be meeting with them in a few weeks, and if you guys have any input, we can always share that with them as well. We'd like to, if we want to move forward with this, we'd want to do some sort of public visual preference survey to give people in the community some input. We would then have a working group where we would kind of draft some goals, objectives, and examples. And then we would share those with you in the Safety and Development Committee. Afterwards, then we would kind of, once we've ironed those out a little bit more, we would, work with our staff group to kind of create an actual document that is, simplified compared to maybe what we saw from Portland, but is pretty, comprehensive and has all the information we want in there. And then at that point, Planning Commission would review, and if I guess move to Common Council, would have to adopt this. And this is something that's within the Planning Commission's powers to kind of, adopt these types of frameworks and stuff like that for the review process. So this is something that we would like to explore. We think it would be a good supplement to our new zoning code and would give us some, I think improve our process and improve the design in the community. So I guess if you guys have any kind of questions, any comments on this?
What are your milestones, your timeline for this?
We think we would like to essentially work on it during the summer, and then in early fall, ideally have it presented to be adopted. I think something around that timeline would be good.
How long are you gonna give the community time to fill out the survey?
We could do it for a month or two, honestly, if we wanted. We had a really good success, honestly, with the zoning code one. We had, I think, a couple 300 responses maybe to our zoning code surveys. We really, they pushed it out on their social media, on the website, things like that. And I think that would be a good way to get good public feedback about this. And I think that was open for a month. So something similar to that is what we'd like to do.
Is there any like door-to-door canvassing?
for any of this?
I don't think we've thought that yet, but I think we'd definitely be open to doing something like that, or having some sort of public, like neighborhood type meetings about this as well. Because I think, definitely whenever we can involve the community in these things, the better it's, it's for our community, so I think that's a good idea too.
So I see this as a discussion item, so we don't need to vote on it. You just kind of need a nod.
Yeah, just I guess, I just want to make sure we have enough time to resolve any questions or comments, and then at that point, we kind of, and I guess a straw poll is something you all are interested in as well.
Yeah, I think this is good.
I think it's great.
I like it too.
There's some neighboring communities that have some design guidelines that, from a professional standpoint, it helps immensely knowing what the city's looking to get when you're putting together. And to your point on something like Taco John's, we can easily have in there that your street frontage should present this way.
Exactly, I think that's something that with this, that's a great example of, we didn't quite have the leverage to say something like that necessarily, and that's something that we could really enforce, but something that these guidelines can give us a little more oomph in that way, give the plan commission a little more control.
I was gonna say something like even as simple as the dimness levels of LED lighting, which would have made it easier for me to make a decision on that.
Yeah, definitely, I think that's something we'd like to incorporate into all this is, have some sort of include our lighting in this, and then we would just have one set of guidelines versus a smattering of guidelines that are kind of housed in different places. It can be hard for people to access, so.
I was gonna say, I really do like having the community meetings idea too, having that involvement too. I mean, I'd be happy to be a part of those.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think, isn't there a West Dallas function coming up in June? June 6th or something, there's like a.
The a la carte festival.
Oh, yeah, that would be a nice time to set up a booth and maybe talk about some of this.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if we will have enough time to get out there for that, but
Sure.
if we can, I would like to do something like that, or, if there's another event later on in the future, I think, in July or something, that would be perfect too, so I think that's a good idea. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
Having more public outreach is always good, so. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we can move on to the discussion item about eliminating split zone properties.
And yes, this is another upcoming project we'd like to kind of give you guys a brief on. So we may have touched on this before, but one problem we have in our zoning code and in our zoning map specifically is that we have about 350 properties in our city which are split zoned. Split zoning is when, as you can see on the right, when typically it was done in certain corridors in the city back in, I believe, the early 1990s, they kind of took a brush stroke and said, everything within 100 feet of the center line is this district. And we've kind of kept that, but it leads to some problems, at least uncertainty and confusion about what district of property actually has to follow, and how that kind of, what uses are allowed. It can sometimes impede our city's land use goals, even by allowing something on a sliver of a property zone something, and then they can kind of put that on the property even if we don't want that. Ultimately, just is the best practice is to have one zoning district per lot, and that's something we would like to work towards in the city. This is just an overall map, and you can see circled here are our main corridors where this is a problem. Greenfield Avenue, National Avenue is pretty extensive. Beecher Street, Lincoln Avenue, and Beloit Road. Our solution would be to rezone all these split zone properties to just single zoning districts, and the one that aligns with our future land use map. So we would want to do these in a few different batches. Probably first, we'd like to start with Beecher Street and National Avenue, our two kind of biggest corridors with the most split zoning. And then we would kind of go on with some of the other ones, but we'd like to take those two first, kind of do them together as a kind of a large group of rezonings. We don't anticipate lots of, feedback or public, opposition to these as compared to maybe our Highway 100 rezonings, which we did earlier, in 2021, because most of these are essentially going to be confirming a zoning. A property might be split zone C2 and RB, and now it'll just be RB or it'll just be C2. And essentially, that's we don't anticipate much pushback from that, and we think it'll really simplify things and make things easier for everyone. So our vision for a timeline would be to share the project with you and Safety and Development right now. And then in June, July, we'll work with some public information meetings and notifying homeowners and notifying property owners about this potential change. And then we'd like to probably have this on the Plan Commission agenda in July again. And then ultimately adopted in August by town council. Then we would move on to the further batches later on, but this first one, we would like to focus on feature and national. So if you guys have any comments or questions about this,
Do it.
do it. Sounds good. All right, great.
All right, and we'll move on to our last item.
Yep, one last item, this will be very quick, just some project updates for you to kind of keep up with our project tracking. One project from early 2021 was Taqueria El Toro. This is a proposed restaurant in our, I believe on Lincoln Avenue. They are currently working on construction of the site. The owners actively working with Steve on some minor modifications with their site landscaping and architectural plans. They'd like to, for example, shift their refuse container back slightly, very small tweaks, nothing major. But they're steadily working towards getting this actually built. I think they had some delays with, a variety of things, but as a small business often does, but they're continuing to work towards that. And hopefully we should be able to have them, get finished sometime this year. From March, Domino's, they had their building permit approved, so we should be seeing some changes on that site shortly. And then from last month, April, the Deco was approved by Common Council. This is the event space on Greenville Avenue. They were approved by Common Council on May 17th. So their next step will be applying for a variety of permits and such, but they've been continuing to explore their kind of refacing work. I believe they do have a demolition permit for that. Their work is permitted, they're being done right now. But they've been taking off that kind of weird siding material. I'm not quite sure what it was. And they're noticing that the brick behind it is actually in better condition than they originally thought it was. They have a new architect and contractor, I believe, that they've been working with, and they think it's salvageable. So they may be coming back to us to update their plans to do brick instead of I believe the original here was like a kind of porcelain tile. There are a few spots where they have, I guess, cement block, like these kind of rectangles on the facade where it's like cement block behind that. So we probably want to work with them to do some sort of tiling or something like that there. But there's some new opportunities, I guess, with that facade. So we'll continue to work with them on that. And I don't know if we need to bring them back to planning commission necessarily. Steve would, I think, determine that, but it's possibly come back here. Otherwise, we might be able to staff approve it. So we'll see. We'll update you as that kind of proceeds. And then Urban Pioneer has a public hearing scheduled for June 7th as well. We did schedule that. So that's our project updates. And I don't know if you guys have any questions or anything, but that should pretty much wrap it up. Yep.
Any question? All right, then that will take us to item E, which is adjournment. If anybody cares to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll just take it.
There was a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.